You've so far talked about TikTok purely as a technology play. And my counter argument might be, but like the reason they talk about the TikTok ban is because of security concerns, because it is a mass surveillance of Americans.
All right. The first thing that I want to say is that spying is very rarely of major importance. And I urge you to argue with me.
Hi, and welcome to Life, History, and Everyday Bullshit. I'm Hetty Benatar, and this is my father, Professor Jerome Benatar. And this is our podcast where we talk about history related to current events and sometimes get into life advice. Okay, Abba, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Did you go swimming yet?
No, I haven't. Actually, I'm going to take swimming lessons, I decided. I thought to myself, I have no idea what the proper mechanic is. So I'm going to take a few swimming lessons. Maybe I can learn how to swim better.
I think swimming lessons is a great idea for you because you like to do exercise with a person. So
That's
like
true.
when you do tennis, you play tennis with friends, but you also take tennis lessons. Like when you're in it,
Right.
you get into it. So I actually think swimming
Right.
lessons is a great idea for you. I'm glad to hear
Great.
it. Hopefully you'll be reporting back to us about your lessons at the next podcast.
In fact, this is going to be the center of our podcast from now
We're
on.
going to change the theme
To
to
swimming. My swimming.
exercise for men in their 60s. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, great. Abba, the thing that I want to talk about a little bit is the TikTok ban and what historical stories or parallels we can draw from the TikTok ban. So as people know right now, Congress has banned TikTok, but President Trump has given an extension. And so the way things stand day to day for an actual TikTok user is you can open the app if you already have it on your phone, but if you need to go to the App Store to download it, you can't get it. All right, Abba, tell me, what does it make you think of?
It makes me think of the efforts by governments to try to prevent the diffusion of technology. So, for example, to prevent the people who knew how to blow glass from leaving Venice and sharing this technology with competitors, Venice imprisoned them or locked them or didn't on the island of Murano. At present day Venice, when you take the tour, you get to see how they blow glass and how beautiful it is, and it's really very, very impressive. But the origin of this location has to do with the fact that countries try to block other countries from knowing their secrets. Everybody recognized that having a particular way of doing things that is better is an advantage, is an economic advantage. And the question is how to go about it. How do you make sure that the technology you have is protected? And also, how do you encourage people from other countries that have technology to come to your country? The original idea of a patent, which is a monopoly of production to somebody, did not rest on inventing something, but rather on importing technology. And then only later on, the patent was extended to supposed innovators.
Okay.
So the idea was to tempt skilled workers from one country to move to the next, to a competitor. And this is something that all countries engaged in the early modern period, and also in the even beyond that, into the 18th century and the 19th century. The British tried to prevent the rest of the world from copying their particularly textile technology, but not only textile technology, but also technology that has to do with pumping water out of mines and so forth. Britain was leading in the Industrial Revolution. Did they succeed? They did not. They did enjoy the advantage of having a few years, decades of having superior technology, but ultimately it almost failed. And why does it fail? It fails because not because the technology itself is copied, but rather because the people who practice this technology are offered incentives to go elsewhere or see opportunity elsewhere, and they bring the technology with them. In the case of the United States, the most famous case is that of Samuel Slater. Samuel Slater was an English textile worker in England, and he immigrated from England against English regulations and settled in Rhode Island, where in Pawtucket he built the first American, British style textile factory.
Could you just remind me, what did that factory produce?
It produced cotton yarn with water powered machines. And that made Slater the kind of the father of American textile industry. And similar factories were established around New England. Another story that is interesting is the story of Charles Lowell. Those of you who live in the Northeast know there's a town called Lowell, Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, we call it Lowell.
You call it Lowell?
I mean, that's
Well,
how they say it.
in Israel, we call it Lowell. And the story is that this guy Charles was a sickly American who went to England on a visit of some sort, and because that's at least according to the story, because he looked so frail and sickly, the British allowed him to visit the textile factories. And they don't allow any foreigners to go in, so they cannot see how it's done. And Lowell, as you say in your part of the world, he was apparently very bright, and in the evenings in his wherever he was staying, he would take notes and do drawings as to what was going on in these factories. And then when he came back to the United States, he got together with a kind of a talented American mechanic named Moody, and they together built factories that were similar to the British ones. And they established a company called the Boston Associates. Lowell himself died. The factory was initially in Waltham, Massachusetts, home to one of America's most important universities, Brandeis.
Yes.
And then they moved to up the river and built an entire textile industry town called named after Lowell. And you can see from there that, again, the English tried not to share it, but it's ultimately always exposed. I mean, this notion that you can keep secrets, industrial secrets, economic secrets, from your competitors is not supported by history. I mean, it's similar in the way that in the 70s and 80s, in the United States, we did reverse engineering of Japanese technology. In the American automotive industry, they decided to try to follow the Japanese model.
Okay. I feel like you've so far talked about TikTok purely as a technology play, and these stories are interesting, but I feel like there's an undertone to your argument of like America is trying to steal TikTok's technology or the knowledge behind TikTok, and you can't really limit once the technology is there and it's so widespread that you can't limit that. But my counter argument might be, but like Instagram has already taken a lot of similar features and taken the technology and mimicked it, right? So
Right.
that has already kind of crossed the ocean or crossed mountain borders, what have you. So that brings me to the question that the reason they talk about the TikTok ban is because of security concerns, because it is like in theory, like a mass surveillance of Americans and a concern of like the surveillance of Americans, American citizens, maybe even American military secrets, etc. So what does that side of it kind of make you think about?
All right. So two things that I want to say in response to that. And I urge you to argue with me. The first thing that I want to say is that spying is very rarely of major importance. I mean, yes, there is Um, there are stories of, particularly during World War II, the United States um, uh, breaking their enemies' codes, and therefore knowing what instructions are doing, and it's good for tactical decisions during war, which ultimately have strategic meanings. But we're not at war, and the best example of how spying is not what it's cracked up to be has is the stories of Robert Hansen and Aldrich Ames. Who are
Don't know
those
these
two guys?
guys.
Yeah,
Don't know.
nothing to. They're not. Hansen and Ames were high officials in the CIA. Ames is the highest American to have found to have worked for the Soviet Union, highest ranked, and he was really running the counterintelligence um, department for a while, or a segment of it in the CIA, and he was working for the Russians.
Huh.
And Hansen is the same. Hansen and Ames cost the lives of American agents in Russia. They shared the most secret information we had with the Soviet Union, and as you can see, it made no difference. No
Well,
difference whatsoever.
I
I mean,
don't
the
know if you
Soviet
can
Union.
say it make no difference. Like
Well,
America still, persevered, but I don't know if you can say it made
no,
no
the
difference.
Soviet Union doesn't exist. And my point here, okay, so the Soviets were successful. They also infiltrated the British intelligence, and they got from us the, you know, they got the nuclear technology, and that led to a famous trial in the United States of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who was supposedly have particularly Julius Rosenberg worked for the Russians, supposedly gave them nuclear secrets, and all of those things. And still, at the end, they were totally destroyed by the war. This says that spying is not that important. But another
Mhm.
story I want to tell you here,
Okay.
in which you can, um, um, in which you can see how technology can help one country to get an advantage, and that's of course the story of Operation Paperclip. What is Operation Paperclip? As
It
World War
sounds like
II,
it's about like Clippy, like the word
yeah, it's
assistant
so
Clippy.
yeah, maybe that's what inspired Microsoft.
Yes,
Uh,
maybe this is what inspired Microsoft. Okay, continue.
but in Operation Paperclip, what happened as World War II was winding down, and it became clear that it will be followed immediately by a conflict with the Soviet Union, and that conflict would require, you know, the highest. No, that let me start again. That
Hmm.
conflict will require sophisticated technology. The Roosevelt administration decided to recruit major scientists from Germany, who were all implicated in the Nazi regime, to smuggle them to the United States, hide the fact that they were former Nazis, and have them help develop the American missile technology. The Germans during World War II developed these missiles called the V1 and V2 um, uh, rockets, and they shot them onto English cities, creating mass devastation and lots of casualties.
Okay.
The Allies did not have that, and the United States wanted to have it. And so about 1,600 of them, six German scientists, were smuggled
That's a
into the
lot.
United States. That's a lot. That's right. And the most famous of them all was Werner von Braun. But Werner von Braun was implicated in the mass killings in England. In addition to the fact that he was a member of the Nazi Party, he also lied in his application for American residence or citizenship, sort of downplaying his Nazism. That they all did that. They all lied, and it's not that the Americans checked to see if they were lying or not. They took them in because they wanted their technology. And Werner von Braun became a major force in the American space program and so forth. So this is a case in which the United States does again take the workers. It's not the technology; it's the people who did it because they know how to do it and used it to develop its own space program and its own interballistic missile program. I mean, the story with Werner von Braun is even more outrageous because he got the Medal of Freedom from the
Oh my
United
God.
States.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
So what does this say? It says that the United States cannot preach to the rest of the world about, drawing secrets from technology or military. That the United States has done it since its founding, and it's what countries do as they compete.
Okay. So I want to push back a little bit on what you're saying here because you're making a point. One, that the technology can't be withheld. Once the knowledge is out there, it spreads. Two, spying is not so effective anyway. So why even try to stop people from spying? Because, the truth is America's going to win anyway. But I guess my pushback on that is like, if spying is so ineffective, then like, why do we keep doing it? I mean, it is possible that it's just so ineffective, but it's also possible that like the effective stories are not the ones we hear about.
Right, and we also know that the Israeli intelligence did brilliantly in the war with Lebanon and with Hezbollah, and all of those things actually did work effectively.
Right. You're talking about when they exploded the
The
pagers that were
pagers
held by
and the self,
Hezbollah.
absolutely. Here is the best story of them all. During the Civil War, the General Lee in 1862, following a successful campaign against the Union forces in the peninsula, goes into Maryland with the idea of raising pro-slavery forces in Maryland. Maryland was a border state with slavery, but it was on the side of the Union. And he had this plan, and for whatever reason, somebody in the headquarters used the paper used to describe the plan, to draw the plan, to wrap 3 cigars. Those 3 cigar wrapper fell from somebody riding on a horse and was picked up by Union forces. And Union forces knew where to wait for Lee and defeated the Confederacy in the most important battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Antietam. And if the Union loses the Battle of Antietam, it's very likely that the English recognize the Confederacy. The English join, sort of offer to mediate the war, and ultimately joining to protect Southerners against the Union. So, of course, this kind of information is very crucial. Is the 3 cigar wrapper. But when we're talking about TikTok, this is not about troop movements or about position of forces or all these other things. It's or about weapons. It's about this general idea that TikTok would be able to know the most intimate things about us. And
Again, Yeah.
And I would point out to you
Yeah.
that it's true that Meta and Google are not uh, uh, working for the Chinese government, but they're also not working for the American government. They're working for themselves, and they have all this information too. So the concern that China would know when when I browse on the web for naughty nurses is worse than when Google knows it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay. Ignoring that comment, but let's take a break and we'll be back with some life advice. We're about to go through some of our life advice. If you want to write us and ask for some life advice, you can email us at info@bullshtick.com. That's info@bullshtick.com. You can also come and check out our website, bullshtick.com, and put in some requests for life advice there. And if you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe or comment on this podcast so that we can keep you engaged and keep chatting with you about the things on our mind. Now we're going to hop into some life advice. This comes from a friend. Okay. I am recently divorced. My ex-wife cheated on me for a couple of years and chose her affair over repairing the marriage. We have 2 school-aged children and we share 50-50 custody. So we must interact on a daily basis. I want to find forgiveness, but despite my higher intentions, I am still haunted by persistent feelings of anger and betrayal. My attempts to build a new friendship with her have so far failed, as I reach the limits of my ability to accept her choices and perspectives, as they are deeply incompatible with my own. What should I do?
Wow. The first thing that comes to my mind is how decent this guy is. That he's a good guy who's trying to do the right thing, and uh, and is confronted with how he feels about things, and this conflict is tormenting him. He knows what to do, and what to do, of course, is to be civil and make sure that the interactions are as conflict-free as possible for the sake of the children. On the other hand, this hurt that he has, which, I think that the years would make it duller, and particularly if he can find another partnership, another relationship, and that would be long lasting and loving, then the insult, the hurt, the injury will be felt less. But what do you do in such a situation? I mean, what choices does he have except doing the right thing, feeling horrible about it, and judging himself for being not as charitable as he wants to be? But this guy sounds like a really good guy. It's a guy I would want to meet. I mean, it's like that's the way a decent person would react. What do you think?
What this question makes me think a lot about is like the laws of forgiveness, the halacha, the Jewish laws of forgiveness. Because that's the piece that really stood out to me in the question is like, we have to interact daily. I want to find forgiveness, but despite my higher intentions, I'm still haunted by persistent feelings of anger and betrayal. I think, so a couple of things stood out to me when it comes to the laws of forgiveness in Judaism. I think, first of all, I think you have to ask for forgiveness to be forgiven. And I think that's a little bit different than Christianity. And
I don't know.
Well, I don't know that much about Christianity, but forgiveness is definitely a big theme in Christianity too, right? Like Jesus forgives you, loves you.
And confessions and stuff like this.
We're experts in Christianity.
Oh
Come
my
to our
God,
other
the
podcast.
depth here is just, it's probably so insulting what we're doing. If anybody did about Jews, we would say, oh, great.
Anyways,
sorry
the
to our
Christians will do
Christian
it.
listeners. If there's any Christian listener, we apologize.
So, um, the in Judaism, the person has to ask for forgiveness. That's the first step
Right.
to be forgiven. And so, my first question to this person is, like, has this ex actually asked for forgiveness? Because maybe you're putting pressure on yourself to forgive when they haven't even asked for it, and so it's not even necessarily your place yet, and that's okay. Um, but
So
yeah, I've got another thought, but go ahead.
I want to jump here.
Yeah,
Um,
you want to add? Yeah.
even if she asks for forgiveness, what does it mean? I mean, who cares if she said I'm sorry? I'm sorry is like I love you. You say it when it's um, when you feel like it. It doesn't have any substantive meaning. I'm sorry. So she asks for forgiveness 5 times. Will that change um, his hurt, his pain, his sense
Mm,
of insult? In fact, I would say the notion she would ask for forgiveness and she would expect that everything will be fine after that um, is not acceptable.
mm,
Some things you do. I mean, I'm not going to um, turn extramarital affairs into a crime against humanity. I mean, it's something that's happened to a long history and stuff like this. But it's a betrayal,
yeah.
and particularly if it's a betrayal, if it happens, you know, you got drunk in a bar. Okay, that's one thing. But if you do it over time, and then it's a betrayal, and it's very painful, and um, it hurts because all of us suffer from insecurities about our can anyone love us and all this other stuff. So I understand that. But the notion that even if she asks for forgiveness, what difference does it make?
Yeah. Okay. But halachically, if someone asks for forgiveness three
Yeah.
times, or maybe it even goes up to 13 or something, but you have
No,
to
three
forgive them,
times. 3 times. Yeah, 3 times. And if the person refuses to forgive on a third time, then he is forgiven.
then he's forgiven. So,
Yeah.
um, so I think the rabbis take two different perspectives on it. One, the person like needs to ask to be forgiven, and two, you do have to forgive on some level, and
Right.
it's not
Right.
really up to you whether you feel like it or not. That
Correct. Yes.
eventually, like, the greater thing for the world is to forgive, or like
Right.
you have to forgive. That is the laws of this society.
Right. Right.
What does forgiveness mean? I think that's a different question, right? Okay, so you forgive. Does it create some kind of seal on the wound? I don't know necessarily. Like, what does forgiveness mean in a context that's so painful? You know, I don't know. And I think what you said about time is probably true. Hopefully time in some ways helps, but I think very painful experiences and betrayals can remain very painful. And that sucks.
Yes, it does. But um, there are ways of coping with it. And one of the best ways to cope with it is um, to date, to go out, to find other partnerships, to fall in love, and to do the to have lovers and do all those things that you do, and the pain, the insult will be there for sure, but it will be less painful. Um, Rather than, I mean, I think that's what I would how I would answer uh, to our mensch, the guy who asked this question, because no easy solutions. You have to try to behave as rationally and as well as you can for the kids, and um, uh, you can't let the pain go. But if you go out and if you ever get good time in particular, and you'll see how her relationship with this Mr. Right uh, becomes another boring cliche. Um, you know, this is Bill Gates said this week that the biggest mistake of his life was leaving his wife Melinda 4 years ago.
Hmm.
He had a midlife crisis of some sort. He had an affair, got divorced.
So she's going to regret it eventually.
Who? I have no idea if she'll regret it. I mean, maybe that guy. Listen, I don't know anything. I don't know him. I don't know her. But I would assume that if he would be going out with charming and interesting and wonderful women, and live a vibrant life as he's doing it, whereas she is stuck with the same guy, his life would look to her far more attractive.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with me today. Yeah. Do you want to plug the book you wrote about the Americans stealing secrets in this moment?
Oh, absolutely. I'll even show it. If you want to read more about my perspective about it and my perspective about intellectual property, here's the book. It's called Trade Secrets, Intellectual Piracy and the Origins of American Industrial Power.
Cool.
If you buy this book, you would learn so much.
And thank you all to all of our listeners for listening to Life History and Everyday Bullshtick. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Hedy Benatar, and we will see you next week.